I put my entire career on the line because I believe in what I believe in.
He ran the Pentagon's top secret UFO program.
They tracked 100 of these things.
Leading a team of government insiders.
People from the CIA, the Department of Defense, all wanted to be a part of this.
Who for the first time have come out of the shadows to reveal what they know.
I don't really care if it's a threat, it's a threat.
Unidentified inside America's UFO investigation. Friday, May 31st at 10.
Hello and welcome to Screen Fever. My name is Adam Barnard, and today I am joined by special guest Joe Thueson to talk about History Channel's new 6-part documentary series, Unidentified, which covers the government's research program into unidentified aerial phenomenon and one man's journey, Lou Elizondo, who used to run that program, who is now working for the public benefit through To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Now, if that was a mouthful and very confusing, don't worry, we're going to break down everything for you as we go. It's a complex subject that for me personally, involves one of my favorite musicians and his side ventures, and also a certain cultural phenomenon that I don't think we take seriously enough, and that because of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, we are starting to learn more about and take more seriously amidst the public discourse. But before we get any farther, Joe, thank you for doing this. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's equally exciting and passionate to talk about, so I'll always take the opportunity to chat with someone about it. So very cool. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually had some trouble going about trying to figure out, okay, who would be a good guest? Who would be, qualified to talk about this? Who is as obsessed with Tom DeLonge as I am because of his artistic ventures, but also, has a side penchant for stuff like this,
right.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon. And you seem uniquely qualified specifically because you run a Facebook, I think like a fan group or a Facebook group for the To the Stars community, the people who are interested in Tom's side venture with To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Right.
Yeah. So I think I want to say about 2 years ago, when that kind of started picking up a little more steam, I was always in like the Blink groups and the Angels and Airwaves groups on Facebook, and I just noticed like there were some people that were kind of like, hey, let's talk about this To the Stars thing, and specifically the To the Stars Academy and what Tom is doing out there. But a lot of people didn't really care in those types of groups. So I kind of saw an opportunity to start a separate Facebook group that would be more specific to that. So the original intent was to kind of have all these people that have been fans of Tom since like Blink and Angels and Airwaves, which is kind of where I come from. But then there's this huge community of people who are really passionate about UFOs and different science out there, and kind of get those two groups together to maybe almost educate each other, because Tom's now reaching this other group where they may not know about his music and his past, and then his music fans don't know about what he's doing now. So that was kind of the intent, to have this kind of eclectic group of people to kind of nerd out and discuss what he's doing with To the Stars. So that's kind of how it all started anyway.
Right. And one of my favorite things about Tom is he's such an unconventional artist in person. Like, he will never bore you. Every few years he'll completely change up what he's doing, whether it's music or movies or research or science or something like this. I guess the best place to start, really, for fans and non-fans alike of Tom's work, whether it's music or research like this, is how did the guy from Blink-182, who made a career of making dick jokes, get this close and get this trusted by so many defense and government types, and has gotten his research with To the Stars, whether it's the videos that were disclosed, or Elizondo or Chris Mellon doing the cable news circuit, or Washington Post or New York Times writing up about the ATIP program.
Sure.
How did he do this? Because a few years ago it might have been some weird headlines. He's in contact with Podesta. Why are the Russian leaks of the DNC server have emails from Blink-182 to like Hillary Clinton's campaign staff? That was all weird, but now it's like it's much more legitimate. It's much more clear and set in stone what's happening. So how did he get here? Let's step back and go back down memory lane.
Yeah, so not to start too far back, but for those that don't know, Tom has been passionate about, what else is out there, um, just the unknown in any sense. And he was real passionate about conspiracy theories and things like that. I've read articles where he was on his tour bus with the Blink Days, and he would just sit and talk the other guy's ears off about this crazy book he just read about aliens, and he'd actually like gather people from the tour bus to go hunt for Bigfoot, which is kind of tongue in cheek. He was probably having some fun with that, but it was just that was kind of the person he's always been. And then he started reading some specific books that led him to kind of what the context that you'll see in the Secret Machines trilogy, I guess, the novels that are written by him and then A.J. Hartley as well. And some of that content got the attention of certain people in the government because it was a little too specific. So as we all know, Tom's very excited about things he hears and sometimes just throws it out there. So I think that was probably the case with those first couple of books where they were seeing what he was writing. And it was like, wait a second, how does this guy know this sort of thing? And that kind of led to some of these meetings. And it sounds like he took an opportunity there to say, hey, listen, I know some of this stuff because of XYZ, but let me pitch this idea to you about disclosure and how we can kind of wrap this into something that's absorbable by the general public. I think a lot of people might say, yeah, we've known about this for a long time. Some of the real heavy research people who have done their homework over the years may know a lot of this stuff already, but I think the overall goal is kind of how do we get this to the general public, and that's kind of where he came up with the To the Stars Academy. So you have like the entertainment sector, you have the physics where they're actually researching some of the technologies, the Atom Project, which is more researching different materials that they've encountered or have looked at and researched that are maybe not made up of earthly minerals is kind of what we're hearing. And all this and of course the show Unidentified, which is all kind of a way to just get the conversation going, get people used to hearing it, and kind of remove the stigma of yeah, that's crazy. If you saw something, you shouldn't tell anyone because people will write you off immediately. He's kind of opening that conversation and making it more acceptable, I think, is kind of what the initial drive is. So I may have answered too much, but just to kind of give you an idea of where he started, it really did just start as, hey, this is a cool subject, just like anyone would have a hobby. But I think probably through his connections, and I know his brother's pretty high up in the military. I always thought perhaps that was a door to some of these things, but that kind of led him to whatever this content was in the Secret Machines that got people saying, wait a second, this guy knows a lot. And by the way, he's a great marketer. He has a huge fan base. So maybe we should listen to him. So.
Yeah, I think what was always interesting to me was how sharp of a left turn Tom's career took once he started really getting in the door with these defense or ex-defense or government officials. Yeah. Because, as of 2015, 2016, he was interested in building, like cinematic shared universes or creative properties like Poet Anderson or Strange Times, or in this case, Secret Machines. And it was intended to be maybe like a novel trilogy and a short film or an animation and a comic book and maybe a feature film and an album, all based around the same tone, the same theme, the same story. And it just happened that one of, or I think it's from the heart, he wanted to make one of those properties about his passion, which is advanced technology, unidentified aerial phenomenon, government conspiracy. And what happened is, in a serendipitous way, he kind of stumbled upon actual kind of actual government conspiracy or people who knew about projects that they were looking to disclose, and weirdly enough he seemed like the right vessel. I think for me personally and for others, we were kind of initially turned off by the fact that it felt too conspiratorial.
Right.
It felt like, okay, like this guy, you've seen him in the interviews just go off about aliens. It's like, how would this guy fare behind closed doors with government officials who, I don't think it went as high as aliens in this early meeting. It was about advanced machinery or reverse engineered technology or technology or materials, like you were saying, that aren't really in the public sphere that have contributed to some of these phenomenon. And so what happened was, as this endeavor to the Stars Academy has gone along, even before Unidentified, which we're going to get to here in a minute, I actually started to get my faith back, because I saw, okay, this isn't about like some spook from the government saying, oh, there's aliens in this building, and basically just spilling everything he worked on in this stranger than fiction fashion. It's actually a bunch of really professional guys who are saying, okay, look, I know some things that I can't talk about, but we're going to all pool our resources and our passion and the financing or the fundraising abilities or the entertainment infrastructure or the production house of To the Stars. We're going to work for the benefit of the public, and we're going to we have leads that we can act on, but we can't tell you why, and we're going to bring that research to you, like bring those 3 disclosed UFO videos, or bring all these Lou Elizondo can sit down with all these ex-military guys who are pilots or Navy men or people who have seen these phenomena pop up on radar or know that there's been a crisis within military bases or within ships. And then they bring it all to the public, and part of the culmination of that is Unidentified. And because it feels so grounded and so believable, these guys are still respecting their NDAs. These guys aren't blabbering about things they shouldn't. These guys are still acting like professional intelligence officials. They're just working, in front of the curtain instead of behind the curtain. I'm thinking, holy crap, this actually might be for real. Like something happened. They synergized somehow with Tom's, eclectic sensibilities and these guys like hardened government way of looking at things. Like, I don't know how, but it happened.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. In the unfortunate part about it was he kind of had this information and he was out there talking about it, but he couldn't ever give the full picture. So a lot of times he'd have to reply with, oh, I can't tell you that, or I can't tell you who I talked to, and I can't tell you, this or that. And people started writing it off like, well, okay, yeah, conveniently you can't talk about it. But yeah, we're also just supposed to, trust this guy that has no credibility in this arena, that he's having these conversations. And, we kind of know the Joe Rogan podcast was unfortunately infamously kind of bad for Tom, in a sense that Joe roasted him a little bit for not being able to say anything. And I'm sure it was killing him, but that's one thing he's mentioned in interviews is there is one rule about all of this is we'll work with you, but you can't say who we are or who you're talking to. And he wouldn't burn that bridge for anything. So he really had to swallow his pride for a bit there and just be the crazy guy for a year or two. And then I think when the WikiLeaks happened, that was, both good and bad. It was a little bittersweet in the fact that people knew, okay, wow, he's actually talking to government officials. He's having these conversations with John Podesta, and at that time, everyone thought Hillary was going to be president, so he would kind of have that into the presidency to kind of work this out to have more disclosure. But when that came out, although it gave him credibility, it completely shut that information tube off for him. Basically, it was a water pipe that was completely sealed off, and they said, hey, we can't do this anymore. So that was like very hard for him, and it totally bummed him out. But at the same time, for the general public, it's like, oh, he was telling the truth about that, so what else is he telling the truth about? But yeah, I think as we go, each kind of thing that he brings out with the videos, especially the radar, the videos,
the Nimitz incident,
yeah,
right,
the Nimitz, and that's all being plastered now all over Fox News, CNN, New York Times, and that To the Stars Academy logo is sitting there on each one of these. And they were literally the first people to release this stuff. And then people thought, okay, he does have access to this stuff, and they are, whoever it is trusting him to release this in a certain way. And so kind of each step gives him more and more credibility. And then, of course, having that core group, the Chris Mellons, the Lou Elizondos, Hal Puthoff, all those guys are very credible in their own rights and have these amazing careers without To the Stars Academy. So it was, again, he was able to get these guys together, very successful people. They aren't doing this for a dollar. They're not trying to get money off of this. They had no reason to quit their very successful careers, Tom included. I mean, he's, last I checked, worth 60 some odd $1 million. So when people say, oh, it's a money grab, it's like, no, because he's probably losing a ton of money on this stuff. This is his passion, and if he wanted money, he would have stayed in Blink and sold millions of albums and just done that. But he really took a leap of faith here and kind of gave up a rock star life with a guaranteed check. And he's really putting a lot of his own money into this. So it was kind of, whenever people say that, I'm like, well, if you look at it reasonably, if he really just wanted money, he would have kept doing what he was doing. And even someone like Lou Elizondo, if they're trying to, get paid off the shares that people are investing, it's not that much. I mean, it's for 5 guys raised like $2 million, but in reality, those guys probably make more than that in their private jobs in their day jobs. So it never made sense to me. That I get why people might have thought that, but if you look at their own careers and their own very successful careers, I just don't feel like they would have left that. And even in the intro of Unidentified, Lou Elizondo, it says he left his position at ATIP, which we can get into, because he was kind of dissatisfied with they weren't doing anything about it. So it wasn't like he got fired or he's some disgruntled employee. Or, he kind of, it was on the same plane with Tom, and after they discussed what they want to do, he was on board, like, yeah, this needs to get out, and there's a way to do it without just blowing the top off, and let's see if we can't kind of be the narrators of the potential biggest story of the millennia, as Tom often puts it.
And I feel like you hit on something great earlier on, which is you're saying like the Joe Rogan podcast was really the low point of this whole journey. If you've been following it from, circa 2015,
yeah,
I think Tom had just launched To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. A lot of you guys will probably remember the live stream where they had that big event and Lou spoke and Tom spoke and everyone introduced it, but it was very vague. Like they said, we have an entertainment division, a research division, and they laid it all out, but it was, I think because they were still trying to work behind closed doors to set up all the evidence or set up the mechanism which they were going to capture the information and record it and amalgamate it and research it. It felt a little scammy, or it felt like these guys, at the very least, these guys know what they're doing, but they don't know how to put together a company. And so Tom went to Joe Rogan's podcast to try to discuss that, because it's kind of like once you have a big announcement as someone in the entertainment industry, you usually go on a press circuit for it. But that was probably a bad idea, so he had to basically say, this is what I'm doing, and every question you answer with me, I'm just going to say I can't say right now. But I'll Joe Rogan has like a 2-hour podcast format. It's really easy to get backed into a corner intentionally or unintentionally, and that's what happened. And even I was kind of let down with the whole Academy of Arts and Science rollout. I just thought this is too vague. Like, they basically are saying they're trying to change the world, but they're not really showing us the first pieces of the puzzle. Now, in the 2 years since then, with one of the high points being Unidentified, Unidentified, they are starting to show the pieces of the puzzle. And I'm seeing that, this isn't Tom trying to megalomaniacally be the poster boy and micromanage everything. What's nice about this is he knows what he can do and what he can't do. He lets the other guys do the research, the interviews, the write-ups. He helps produce the media pieces. He makes music. He does the interview circuit. I think a lot of his recent interviews have been so much better than they were 2 years ago, and so much more set in stone. And for me, it was like, for so long I wanted to believe Tom, but like the rational thinker inside of me, the Mulder and Scully dynamic. I was like, I just can't quite trust this yet. And I'm starting to like, I'm starting to be blown away by the show, because it's like, it is so grounded and focused with reasonable, achievable goals of, creating a mechanism within the government. Lou wants the government to be able to study these things again. Tom wants it in the public sphere, and they're accomplishing both, even with this show.
Yeah. And I think he would say, like, we're going to put some of the money will go into the technology to build some sort of craft, right? And people are like, really, man? Like, you're going to do that with $2 million? Like, how much does, Boeing or whoever, pay for these huge things? Like, it's just not going to happen. And then later on, you see, well, actually, we have someone on our own board who used to run Skunkworks, and hey, isn't that a great connection to sell the research or sell the designs to someone who can actually build it and has the funding? So even something like that, it's like, okay, that makes a little more sense, that we're not going to actually be out there with the hammers and screwdrivers building a craft, but we're going to perhaps sell off the technology and the design and the the engineering behind it to an established corporation that can fund something like that. And that's where this could potentially benefit someone if they did invest in this company. And maybe we're not going to film Strange Times. They just sold that to, I believe, TBS, and it kind of makes more sense now. It's they're not out there. It's not Tom out there with his camera filming Strange Times. He's putting his writing into it, and it's his ideas. But this company can sell these ideas and designs off to very established corporations who are professionals at doing that particular whatever it is, whether it's entertainment or building a spaceship, essentially, to do that for them, and then they kind of have that sold off. So even stuff like that, like in that first kind of live announcement of the company, they're like, oh, we'll do this and that, and people just kind of rolled their eyes. But I feel like now, as you said, as we're kind of understanding, like, okay, this makes sense that you have connections in all these areas, and you may not be doing flinging the hammer, but you have the design and the technology to sell.
And I feel like I understood what the money was going towards in terms of the research, because like the History Channel was probably paying for the production and the airfare and of course the salaries for the editors, the technicians, but like what they weren't paying for is the board meetings and the infrastructure of the companies and the reports, because I'm sure all of this gets documented, gets stored somewhere, gets organized. Because Lou's conducted hundreds of interviews or reached out to hundreds of people throughout the government and the military who have been told, it's like, we don't care that you saw this on the radar. We don't care about all this credibility behind what you saw that could pose a defense threat. Right. It's like, just be quiet, delete the radar. We got, you're crazy. These people get gaslit. And for them, they're scared to talk about it. They're frustrated. If they, even mention it, they're labeled themselves as spooks or delusional. Maybe there are higher ups who want to study it or who do have a program who study it or know everything, and maybe there aren't, but they're kind of almost like shaming or gaslighting so many people within the government or intelligence community that's like, you know what, you might have saw something, but if you say it out loud, you're not going to be taken seriously. So, it's best you stay quiet about this. And Lou is trying to actively fight that by taking the cameras to these people and getting very credible pieces out in the mainstream press to then have a lot of these guys who have stories from, maybe 10, 15 years ago to come out on the show, or maybe just speak off camera to them and say, here's what I know, here's what happens, here's how I think people try to keep me quiet, here's what I can contribute to this ongoing research project. And I think the ultimate goal is not to keep this behind a paywall or keep the research that's done or the revelations that are made behind the curtain. Lou and Tom and Chris and everyone want this to really be, I finally get the public benefit element to the company. You know,
Right.
that makes much more sense now. And I think I honestly do think the show is just the first step of it. Like, I think we're going to get more seasons or more ways that this information is going to be presented to the public.
Right. I mean, just the fact that there's now the Navy is, putting together an actual trackable system to report this stuff. And of course that story broke and was all over the news.
It's April, right? Like
Yeah,
recently.
it's like super recent. And that was Lou, that was Tom and Lou saying, hey, we need something. Or Chris, Chris was working with people that he used to work with in the government to say this, we need to note this stuff. And I don't know if you don't want to get into the whole if this is a security situation or not, because as I've learned, that it's a very split thought on that in the UFO groups out there, whether this is a threat to our nation or if it's not. But either way, the fact that if we see something that we don't know, we don't have that technology.
Yeah.
Whether it's from another country or not, I think it's just common sense to track that and do some due diligence. And I think people are finally starting to understand that. So, I mean, even something as simple as that is huge in the grand scheme of things that has never really been done before. And without kind of the path that they've taken, and they couldn't do that on day one, right? They needed to kind of have some credibility behind things before they can jump to that. So people are like, well, they're not doing enough. I want to know everything now. It's just not going to work that way.
Yeah.
They're moving pretty quick, I feel, with what they've already done in the short time that they've been around. And I get why people are anxious. Everyone's anxious, but they know that slow progress is better than no progress. And if it's too much at once, that well will dry real quick, and suddenly, it's all for nothing. So I think they understand that, and that's where the professionalism of Lou and his background, he understands how to say things. And even on the show, they make it very clear that we don't know if this is another country's technology, another something like a human made this, or we don't know if it's from somewhere else. They don't come out and say like, oh, these are aliens and they're going to blow us all up. It's like, that's not what they're trying to do, because they know that that's too polarizing and that's not going to get people's attention, and that's just going to turn half the people off right there.
Yeah, I think the way the show is marketed and the way the show is presented on the History Channel, or even just in the headlines, it's so easy to go on Rolling Stone or Time or Newsweek or NME or any of legitimate political pundits or even entertainment pundits and see headlines with Tom DeLonge and think, oh my gosh, this guy's lost it. Like
Right.
He's like, it's kind of like this aliens exist mindset, the 1999 Bling song. But what happens is when you watch this show, I am completely blown away or enamored with the professionalism and how grounded it is, even in the way people approach this, even the way Tom approaches this. Because they say, look, let's just boil it down to facts. We all might have, some of us might think it's ancient religion was, aliens have been in our religion and that's their portal. Maybe it's aliens have been involved with government or secret society or giving us technology.
Yeah.
Or it's just, people from another dimension, from us from the future, dimensional portals, there's time warping. There's so much that it could be, but the matter of fact is this show boils it down to the essentials, and it says, look, no matter what you think it is or what it might be, there are things in our airspace, and here's the evidence, here's the testimony. They're building that case. They're building that case as any good investigative journalist or intelligence professional would.
Right.
And after they've built that case, then, we see at the end of season 1, they start to narrow it down. They say, look, okay, so these unidentified aerial phenomenon, they often often pop up by military deployments, by nuclear power. They seem drawn to nuclear power. Here's the concentrations of them, like by Catalina Island. Here's why they might concentrate here. And throughout that journey, it's not Tom in his pickup truck talking to Lumi like, oh my God, it's just like this thing, like the ancient Incas and the Mayans. And it's none of that. I feel like Tom is kind of, after 20 years of being fascinated and, let's be honest, a bit conspiratorial, he's like, I'm so passionate about this. I'm going to ditch all my pretenses and all that I think I know, and, get my boots in the ground with these guys and find out what we do know, what we can prove, what is completely unimpeached, what is unimpeachable evidence, unimpeachable sources. And that's, lending so much credence and believability to this venture, because now it's like, we just want to know what it is. We've come together for the good of the public. We're passionate about it. What is going on here? And that might take years, but like you said, I think they're already pretty far into the process for barely being around, a year and a half as a company.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he knows what he has, and it's probably super hard for him to keep his mouth shut all the time, just because he's so excited about it. And you'll see a couple tweets or Instagram posts go up and then they go down, and people are like, "What was he saying?" And I think he's kind of got people around him that's saying, "Hey, don't let's not share that one yet." But yeah, and part of me, honestly, I don't know, when Unidentified, I first watched it, and it was after I believe it was Ancient Aliens is the show on history.
That's the lead-in, yeah. That is.
And
the
I'm kind of like, I get it, because that's their target audience, So I think each show has been pulling in around 1.3 million at least, which is awesome for a Friday night on the History Channel.
Well, plus it's awesome for cable ratings. Like so many people will watch this way later, or will buy it on Amazon or iTunes, or stream it from the History Channel site. So like for cable ratings, that is really solid at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was like, I get it, but I almost wish it wasn't bookended by that sort of stuff, because I think it gets kind of pulled in with that then. And, God bless Ancient Aliens. It's entertaining, and we all like to watch it. But I've always felt like this is a little different. It's like this isn't just let's have fun with these ideas. This is more like, factual. This is what's happening, and here's what people are saying, and here's active military, which again seems like not a big deal to a lot of people, but this is kind of the first time that like active military men and women are saying and they're finally okay with that. It was always some 70-year-old guy from World War I or World War II saying like, I saw this once, and people are like, okay, all right, cool, man, that's awesome, like that's a great dinner story, But I think this kind of changes things when you have someone, and these pilots are, they're super smart individuals. You have to be like really smart to be a pilot in the Air Force. Yeah, so these aren't like some
mental
farmer.
Health screening, everything.
Yeah. So I mean, it does change the dynamic, and no offense to the other people, but it does make it more credible. I almost wish it was on like just a regular, Fox main TV station that was just up with other shows, and maybe one day it is, but I get why they put it there.
Yeah, I feel like we were all like scared. I think we were all scared at the beginning that this was going to be like going to the woods where some 70-year-old guy lives in a cabin and tells him about how he got probed inside this flying saucer, and it's like, really gross and weirdly specific, and again, oftentimes people who are kind of on the fray in general. But like you said, like all these guys, even in the way they conduct themselves in the interview, it's very professional. Right. They very much feel like military personnel. And my whole thing, which I think would be great to touch on now, is that I'm wondering, is this really a disinformation campaign? Like that was my feeling from the beginning, or smokescreen, or something where legitimate information or legitimate research will be performed or will be disclosed, But it's ultimately, Chris Mellon and Lou and other people are doing this to, as maybe partial disclosure, but also to make damn sure that they steer away from the actual secret programs, the technology, and that is our government's technology or allies of our government who have who are behind all these sightings. It's just military testing. It's craft from other dimensions, other time, whatever it is. And for them, it's like, okay, the public can't handle this, so we're just going to partner with Tom and tell the world what we can, but also control the stream of information.
Yeah.
That was kind of my fear. I guess another thing I wanted to bring up was about Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon. Like, I like them both in the show, and I like what they have to say. I still wonder, I'm like, these guys are counterintelligence veterans. This is their job to kind of mislead. So especially given how shaky the first few years were, are we sure they're not misleading us? I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I know where I stand. I'm just raising these as questions.
Right.
I hope no one listens to this who works on the show or whatever. This is just, this is vetting. This is the public now needs to vet these people. And I think Chris and Lou and Tom understand this to an extent, even if it gets a little weird in the press. It's like, okay, if you're working for the benefit of the public and you're very clearly doing big things, we just got to check up on you and know that you are in fact working for our benefit, and it's not a personal thing. It's like, we want to believe you. We feel grateful for your work. We just have to vet it like any newspaper or publication or peer-reviewed academia would work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a discussion that needs to be had, and even on that Facebook page, it's like, I feel so many people are like, oh, this is just the government, this is disinformation campaign, and I almost think, like, are the people saying that part of disinformation? Like, are they trying to reverse psychology? This is all fake, and it's like, well,
it's like Russian trolling in the context of UFO disclosure.
I try not to get like that, but sometimes I'm like, it's the same 5 guys that say this every time. I'm almost starting to wonder, but anyway. I think it's a legitimate question, but my thought, and I don't have a huge background on what people have done in the past, Stephen Greer's and all that. I know what you mean. I don't come from that camp. I'm more on the original Blink Angels and Airwaves fan. I'm starting to learn more about that side, but for me, I don't think that it is, in the fact that I don't get why they would do that. It's like, why bring it up? You know what I mean? If I have something I want to hide, I'm not going to create a campaign to talk about it. Why would I even bring it up? If the government can just say, nope, it's hogwash, that's all just Hollywood.
Which they used to, by the way. For many years, they would deny the existence of ATIP or deny the existence of these encounters, like the legitimate ones even.
Yeah, and people are like, yeah, okay. And that's what caused the stigma, It's like that. So why create something that reverses that thought? Why create something that gets people okay with the thought of it? I would think if this was truly ran by some government agency to disinform the public about the truth, they would have just left it alone and left us all to our own devices and just keep denying it. It's counterintuitive or counterproductive to bring it and spray it all over the news if you don't want to talk about it, or if you don't want people to think that it's a possibility. And the other piece is that I found interesting after Unidentified came out. I want to say it was like the 2nd or 3rd episode. You have people from the government now saying, Lou didn't run that. He never worked for that.
And to me, that's the disinformation.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so that crosses that off then. So why would the government, who's using Lou and Tom to disinform the public, now say, nope, don't listen to him, basically. And that leads me more to believe the intro, which I talked about before, is that Lou was not happy with how they were handling it, and they weren't doing enough. And Tom had this device and kind of mechanism to do what Lou wanted to do all along. And that's why he said, you know what, I'm going to hitch my wagon to this company and do it here. And
See, to me, I feel like basically the ATIP investigation, basically the entity that is the investigation changed from government held to public held. You know, like
yeah,
basically,
exactly.
if Lou wants to continue researching and building a case, if he leaves the government, where do you think he's going to find $1 or $2 million, even just for travel money and to run the investigation? You know, it's like that's hard to raise privately, and also if it's going to be this ex-government guy who's like, I want to go on a UFO hunt, you're going to have some really weird people who want to
Right.
pay you the money, and it's like I think he realized Tom was running a professional production or entertainment house, and
Right.
you know, if he wanted to continue this privately, you know, especially military guys when they get in their 40s or 50s, like Chris and Lou, you do kind of age out. I think that's just
Right.
kind of the culture, especially considering Lou was so much of a combat guy and so much of a boots on the ground, you know, deployed to foreign countries. At some point, you do get a little too old to do that,
Right.
quite frankly, or you know, a new generation comes in and either you have to move into management or consulting or whatever. So it's like sometimes these kinds of people want to reboot their career anyways, and it feels like almost a few of these paths crossed at just the right time.
Yeah.
And now Lou's basically saying, I want to continue my work because I know it's important. I'm a believer in my work, and it is real. I can't tell you everything I know because, you know, he is under NDA and he wants to keep a security clearance,
Right.
but he can kind of start fresh and jump into a parallel track with Tom, and then do what he's doing right now. And I mean, look at the pilots, like you were saying, like, you know, if this was really a disinformation campaign, how do you get so many qualified military personnel from so many different states
Right.
to all essentially give the same story? And again, in the interviews, like, it's convincing. I don't feel like these are actors. Like, I feel like these are people talking about their experiences. And so when you put that all together, it's like it would be so much work to be a disinformation campaign. And what are they disinforming? Because like Lou said, I want to go out and build an apparatus to research this and for people in the government to report it. And he's done exactly that. He didn't say, like, you know, by the end of season 1, you're going to know where the secret hangar is, where all these interdimensional beings are
Right.
hiding, you know, beneath the Denver airport in the military
Yeah,
base or
yeah.
whatever, you know, like, it's not that. It's so far from that.
Yeah, here's a Polaroid of an alien sipping a Mai Tai in Denver somewhere. You
I
know?
love those shows, by the way. I watch those anyways, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I've always wanted the truth. I'm like, come on, take it seriously, guys. That's been my
Right.
problem with so much, because there is so much bullshit out there in the UFO community or in the alien conspiracy community, that what little is real or legitimate or worth investigating oftentimes just gets lost in the noise. But this
Yeah.
show seems to be singling in, you know, this project seems to be singling in on what is legitimate and what is provable.
Yeah, I struggle with that on the page, man. It's like, you know, I want to keep it open and for everyone to discuss, but I get, you know, sometimes it's a bit much, some of the posts. But yeah, it's the nature of that community, though. It's like people, you know, want to believe some of that stuff, and I think there's a fine line, and there should be a happy kind of middle ground of, you know, let's discuss these things, but let's keep it, you know, credible at the same time, because then we're kind of reversing all the work that they did to kind of, you know, resolve some of these stigmas that come along with it. But yeah, I think definitely the show does that beautifully and kind of rides that fine line.
Well, then let me ask you a bit about the show, just in the way it's produced and put together. And again, you can hone in on the 6-episode series.
Yeah.
I've said a bit of how I feel about it. How did you feel about how the show was put together just as a production, you know, as a documentary production? And maybe what were some of the big sensational takeaways, the things that would make you want to watch another season if you could of the show?
Yeah, I thought just like the interviews themselves really hit. You know, like we said before, the credibility of the people on the show. This isn't, you know, driving to some cow farm somewhere and talking to someone. This is, you know, actual evidence that you can look up, and I think the videos that come along with it are key too, because without that visual, that's also kind of helping people get their minds wrapped around the potential of this. Because a lot of people say, okay, I might believe that, but maybe in their heads they're thinking like Independence Day, where this huge thing is hovering over New York City. And it's not necessarily that. It's, you know, these these smaller kind of blips and unexplainable things that can't be a bird and it can't be a drone. There's no way it's any of this, and it's not something we've developed either. So then what does that leave? And I think they did a good job of kind of narrowing it down throughout the 6 episodes. They didn't just kind of throw it all out there at once. They kind of left you wanting more after each episode, and I actually thought that got better as it went along. And I was a little worried, like the first one was it, and like, okay, that was pretty good. Did they kind of give all they got on that first one, and the rest will be kind of filler? I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but it built up real nicely, I feel like. And that last one was probably my favorite one because it really kind of brought the whole thing together. And like those interviews with the Italian government, that was like pretty awesome to watch. And just kind of it made it more global, right? Like it's not just them. There's other government entities that are trying to do the same thing, and it's a global effort, and it's not just some rogue thing that Tom and whoever are trying to accomplish. There's other people that are interested in sharing what they know and kind of building this network of information, and it kind of left you at that, which was really cool. And I don't know if you noticed when the very last question before the credits, and someone asked him, kind of like a producer or something asked Lou, do you think the public is ready to believe this or something like that? And he just kind of stood up and walked away. And he's not sure, right? Like, I think it was nice, kind of a cliffhanger almost for the next season, I hope. Anyway.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this,
though. Cool.
I'll tell you this, though. I felt like that was the one single moment in the entire show that was completely staged. Like, that was something. Yeah. See, so much of the show you're expecting to feel staged because it's like, oh, is this Tom DeLonge just going to be like in his own head, trying to like dramatize all this stuff? And it wasn't. And like, I'm with you. I loved it. I thought it was a perfect season outro, but it almost felt like the guys were sitting behind a camera thinking like, okay, what's the last shot of our season? And it's like, let's get Lou like walking off camera when we ask him a question. But I was totally okay with that. That was just some fun theater. I didn't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, and like the recreations themselves, like I didn't think they were too cheesy or anything.
No,
I was a little worried about that.
Fact.
Like some of the music, like this, like the score, I guess, behind it is like, really kind of theatrical. But I mean, that's part of a TV show. You can't be sitting there in silence, talking. So some of the production behind it, I get it. And I think for the general public to be interested, you kind of have to keep their eye, keep them focused and kind of make it a little more maybe theatrical than you need to. But yeah, I think overall it wasn't super cheesy or over the top. I think they did a good job by keeping it entertaining, but also informational.
Yeah, and in today's world, I mean, that's just how you communicate the intensity of the stories. It would be weird if it was just like slideshows. Like if someone's talking about how these alien craft are whizzing around the sky and essentially doing like flybys right by these fighter jets, 100 feet away. That's scary, and so it's like I think the music builds the ambience, and that's just part of the production of it all.
Yeah, I don't remember what episode it was, but I think it was one of the interviews. They're in this like seedy motel.
Yeah,
and I was kind of like, do you need to do that? I don't know. You probably could have done that at like a Holiday Inn or something.
Well, actually, the funny thing is, I think that made sense because the guy they were talking to was really, really not wanting to be on camera. Like he was doing it, but and so it's like it's something where stuff like that might literally be. It's a request of the guy. It's like, how off the grid can we meet? Again, it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's stranger than fiction. Even just in the way our world has progressed over the past few years, with informational technology and social media and just kind of like the way our society communicates with each other, it's gotten so strange. Even in politics and global events, like a few years ago, we could never have predicted all the crazy stuff that's happened.
Oh,
so for
sure.
me, it's like this show is par for the course. Like, oh yeah, of course that's how the government would disclose stuff through Tom DeLonge. Like, of course, it's like
why not? Crazier things have happened, right?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite moments for the show that I want to quickly touch on is it happened later in the season, I believe, and it was, I don't remember who said it. It might have been Chris Mellon or it might have been Lou, but they basically said oftentimes people within the government try to bring these UAP reports that should be researched. In any other circumstance, it's like if we suspected it was the Russians or the Chinese, or we suspected it was a enemy that we could see, and that was maybe a sovereign nation invading our airspace with superior technology, it would be the top defense emergency of the decade.
Yeah.
What happens is some of these UAPs act in such erratic ways that none of us can fathom that the technology would exist, which leads us to believe it's either from another dimension or it's aliens or it's something that comes in direct opposition to people's religious beliefs.
Right.
And they said oftentimes some of these top defense officials, whether it's the Secretary of Defense or people inside the Pentagon, they are often deeply religious, probably Christian, and to look into this is almost like opening up a portal to the occult. I know a lot of, Hitler and other past tyrants or government leaders have tried to look to the supernatural and the spiritual to draw power. And I think there's a fear that, like, if we investigate this or discuss this or legitimize it, even if we legitimize the possibility of its existence, we are angering God, or we are going to disprove God, or we are opening the portal to very dark influences. And I mean, I'm spiritual myself and I understand that,
Sure.
But it's like, that's almost like a very pre-Renaissance mindset where it's like, we just can't, we can't engage with reality because reality might be inconvenient to us.
Right.
And to me, it's, I think we all think in our culture, oh, there's probably a deep state, or, oh, of course the CIA are working with aliens, or of course Area 51's loaded with all this crazy stuff. And the sad reality of it seems to be that no one wants to research it because it might have too big of an impact on our culture or our religious culture. And for me, that was the most 2019 thing that could possibly happen on this show.
Right.
It's like, of course that's what it is. Of course that's why we haven't made progress with disclosure, is because the people inside don't want it to happen because it scares them on a deeply personal and spiritual level.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of twofold. Is first off, they don't like the fact that they don't know. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if it's and I don't even know if it's like an ego thing, but it might be the fact that, like, okay, if this exists, then they know the follow-up question is, what are we going to do about it? And they say, we don't know. So why even, go down that road if we don't have an answer for it? Because then you're just going to freak everyone out without any sort of answer. So I think that's probably the main thought is, we don't know how to do that. We're not capable, so we don't want this to be all over the place, that there's this potential threat, if it's a threat or not. Either way, we don't want this out there that we're not that advanced. That's number one. And then number two, you're absolutely right, is I think on a presidential level, you aren't going to get a president to come out and say anything specific, because especially currently, there's going to be that evangelical base voter that they're going to upset, which, I get that. I'm Christian. I'm strong in my faith as well. But I think I can kind of balance the two in today's world, right? That you can kind of be both, but not everyone's there yet, right?
Well, my theory is very simple. My theory is that if something as simple as investigating a UFO can break your faith wasn't that strong in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm saying? But again, it's the fear of not knowing. It's the fear of being wrong. It's the fear of being out of your depth. The United States government and the United States intelligence and defense apparatus is ostensibly the strongest in the world. and they look like preschoolers who are getting
Right.
laps run around them by the high school football team with these, UAPs. So for them, it's like, if it's not, if they haven't landed in Times Square to introduce themselves as beings from the future, we're fine.
Right.
They're going to be relegated to small reconnaissance blips,
Right.
crafts that are seemingly doing reconnaissance runs and then disappearing. So it's like, hear no evil, see no evil, think no evil.
Right. I mean, to their defense, it would just cause panic, and what would they be able to do about it? Nothing. So why bring it up if you don't have an answer? I mean, I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
So let me ask you this before we wrap up. What do you think the next step is? Either with the show or with To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, what do you think we're going to see in the next year if, in fact, this is just getting started?
Well, I'm hoping from the To the Stars side of things, I'm obviously excited for the tour. That's for one. I can't wait for that. I'm going to 2 shows. I have them tickets already and the meet and greet and all that, so I'm very excited. But aside from that, there's obviously TBS bought Strange Times, so I'm looking forward to that. And I think that's going to tailor to more a younger generation to kind of get them used to the idea, which was always part of Tom's vision as well. And there's going to be, I believe they're filming.
I've actually checked. I have access to this production listing website, and it's listed for October right now. So I think they were supposed to shoot in July, but then they pushed it to after the tour because I think it was they were running out of time to shoot the movie before rehearsals and the tour happened. So that's going to be after Tom gets back. He's going to shoot the Strange Time, or it's called Monsters of California now. I think they're trying to avoid the Stranger Things comparison.
Sure.
So that's definitely going to happen. That has financing. I think production offices are open. Dean Cundy, who shot Apollo 13, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future. He's Tom's director of photography. So he's actually, I think, Tom's big step into directing a mainstream type feature film.
Yeah, and if you read Secret Machines, that reads as a feature film. I would be so excited to watch that movie. I've actually interviewed AJ Hartley.
Really?
For
How?
the page. I'm friends with him on Facebook. He's a super cool dude, and I just messaged him. I was like, hey, can I send you some questions about, I think it was the second book. It was right before it came out. And he was like, yeah, totally. So I sent him 5 or 6 questions, and he answered them all. And it was when the page was first getting started, and I put it on the page. So it was super cool.
That's great.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy, and he writes all sorts of stuff. So a small plug for him. Check out his other stuff. But also, that series just sounds when I read it, I'm envisioning this whole movie. So I can't wait. If that becomes a feature film, that would be super rad. And then the other piece, I think Unidentified, this is just my own personal opinion, is that there will be another season, and I think they'll touch on the Adam project. So that's more of the material that they may have that has these kind of funky makeup that we can't find these minerals on Earth type of thing, because I know they've kind of teased that in the past that they have stuff, right? That's more of the Hal Puthoff's realm.
Science division.
Yeah, so he has items or whatever you want to call it, and I seem to remember there was a post once where Tom and someone was going to someone's house to talk about where they found it and what it kind of describe what it is. So I feel if there's going to be another season, I could see it being about the Adam project and kind of this material now that they found. So that would make sense to me as kind of that next step to here's the crafts themselves, which was season 1. Here's some material, season 2, and then I don't know, maybe something with Skunkworks and Steven Justice for season 3, something like that.
Yeah, I'm convinced. I am so convinced that Steven Justice is the guy on the show, right? The Skunkswork guy.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm convinced he knows so much more than anybody else.
Oh yeah.
I've seen he's the one
sure.
guy where when Lou asks him questions, he's putting on a great performance or he knows a ton that he can't tell yet.
Yeah.
Because I look at it this way. Back in the 60s or the 70s, we had the SR-71 Blackbird, we had the B-2 bomber, the stealth bomber.
Yeah.
Those are, even to this day, immensely advanced crafts, and those were made decades ago. So what's been happening behind closed doors? Like, you can't tell me all they've built are like drones. Like, that's not all. I'm sure, like, not even, just forget any alien or otherworldly involvement or any foreign governments or anything from another dimension. Just say that's all BS. I still believe there are like super advanced crafts that we're only going to know about 10 years from now that would blow our minds if we knew they existed today.
Yeah, and maybe it's not even a craft. I think a lot of it in the future could be like, hey, we have this satellite that can like
something
take out this base from I can hit enter on my computer, and so I think it's someday it's scary to think about, but I feel like it's they joke about the Space Force, but I don't think it's like necessarily fighting aliens in space, but I think it's space is going to be the next territorial struggle, and having satellites that can do major damage from anywhere on the planet is important, or is kind of the future, I think. So even if it's not a craft, it could be some sort of technology like that. But
I think we're looking at the next wave of technology as another kind of nuclear proliferation. It's this century's version of nuclear proliferation, because if we thought we could wipe each other out or control the masses 60, 70 years ago, how much more can happen now? I think that's part of the reason this is being put in the public eye, because some of this can be dangerous, and it's something the public should know about and have a say in how it's controlled or regulated. Because my theory is that as a race, as a species, we have advanced technologically way beyond we're ready to adapt to intellectually. It's like we're 50 years ahead of where we are in the way we think. Like, I feel like we still sometimes think in the 1960s terms and Cold War era terms. So one of the reasons I'm a fan of this is because it's kind of helping, I feel like, to bring people into a new age of thinking.
Yeah. No matter how far along we come in technology, the human ego will always exist. I think that's what it comes down to, and you're going to have a power struggle and people, beating their chests, no matter how technologically advanced you are. So, unfortunately.
So before we go, can you tell people again where they can find you and where they can find your page, the To the Stars page?
Yeah, it's just on Facebook, and it's just To the Stars with the 3 dots, which is kind of how their official, To the Stars ... So definitely come out. If nothing else, it's super fun conversation. We have employees at To the Stars, the actual store, that are members, which is kind of cool, and they kind of comment and stuff, and I do like giveaways every now and then. I just did one because we hit 5,000 members, so I just did like a gift card to the store itself, random drawing, that type of thing. So I try to keep it fun and just a place where we can, like I said before, kind of have both worlds connect, so it's kind of more like the heavy UFO people, and then there's the Tom people kind of coming together in one arena, and there's not really another group like that on Facebook from what I know. But anyway, so check it out.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. I hope if anybody's been listening and they haven't seen Unidentified, I would highly recommend it. It's if nothing else, it's a very well produced and fun show to watch. At its worst and then at its best, it could be one of the most important documentary shows to come out in recent times. And thank you, Joe. Again, I'm so glad you were able to do this, because I feel like you're the perfect guy who could identify with my balance of loving Tom's music, but also being really interested in this phenomenon. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff, and there's few people who can key in on this specific topic, so I love being able to just chat about it. So yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Well, hopefully we can have you back in the future for some other Tom DeLonge To the Stars, Strange Times, maybe once the movie or the show comes out, a discussion built around that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this discussion, we actually have another Tom DeLonge-centric discussion on Poet Anderson, the Dreamwalker, the short film and the album, so you can go check that out. Otherwise, subscribe to our channel and check out more content if you're interested. My name is Adam, and you've been listening to Screen Fever.